Hey guys, Mr. Bowman here. Today's learning objective is in green and we are learning to add and subtract integers. The key word from the learning objective that we need to be aware of is that word integers. And that really refers to any whole number. So any whole number. And that number can be positive or it can be negative as well. And what we're learning or trying to get across today is how can we add and subtract negative numbers as part of our maths? We're probably good with the positive side of it, but how does all of this work with negatives? So let's try to get into some examples using the number line below of how all this works. The first scenario we're going to look at is just a real basic question. What is 1 plus 2? So really basic, but let's see actually how it works on our number line. So 1 signifies the starting point, and the plus 2 tells us that we're increasing it by 2. So we're going plus 1 plus 2, leaving us at 3. So that there would be our answer for that question there. But what we've actually got is we've actually got a whole bunch of hidden brackets that makes our life a bit easier. So what that's saying is that 1 is positive 1 and we're adding positive 2 and they combine to get 3. All of this is too complicated. Mathematicians are notoriously lazy, so we don't write up all that information, we just write parts of the information. So what we know here is if we're adding a positive, that's just the same as adding. We can then have a look at subtraction. So let's maybe try, well, what's 3 minus 1? In our heads, we know that's going to be 2 because we start at 1. So we start at 3 and we go back 1, which will end us up at that 2 mark there. So subtraction is normally associated with decreasing. So what we actually got here is we've got positive 3 minus positive 1, and that there gets us to 2. And these are two kind of standard basic addition, basic subtraction scenarios, slightly reworded. So this adding here normally just means increasing, and this subtraction here normally just refers to decreasing. We're now going to move on to some slight variations of this. So let's carry on with our adding portion of it. So let's say we've got maybe 4, which is a positive 4, and we're going to add negative 2. So the key difference here, we're not plussing negative 2, we're adding negative 2. So this addition here normally tells us we're increasing, but the subtraction in here saying it's the opposite to increasing. So opposite to increasing. And we can simply say that, in other words, that there is a decrease. So that there would become 4 minus 2, which just gets us to 2 as our final answer. So if you think of that as our number line, we're starting here at 4. We normally increase our answer, but because we're doing the opposite, because of that negative 2, we're actually going to go the opposite direction. There's 1, there's 2. Hence why we land on positive 2 as our answer. And the same can be said for the negative ones. So let's have a look. So maybe let's look at 2, which would have been a positive 2, minus a negative 1. So that negative sign there says we're decreasing, but that negative sign there is saying, well, we're doing the opposite to decreasing. So we've got the opposite to the decreasing, which is just an increase. And we've learnt that that increase is the same as addition. So the other way to just phrase that question is that 2 plus the 1, that's going to get us to 3. And this last bit is the trickiest part. The way I normally encourage people to remember it is those two negative signs, so one negative sign and another negative sign. If you put those together, if you move that over here, they form together to get a plus sign. So we really need to know the combinations of things that we're working with. So if we're adding a positive, we know that just becomes adding, which was this scenario here. If we are adding a negative, that becomes a negative, just like this scenario here. We know if we're subtracting, I'll just write sub for subtracting a positive, which is this scenario up here, that there is a decrease. And we know if we sub a negative, just like this scenario here, they end up becoming a positive. So hopefully that makes sense. That was a breakdown of adding, subtracting with positive and negative numbers, which might lead to kind of like the opposite of increasing and the opposite of decreasing when you're dealing with negative numbers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to go through a couple scenarios, rapid fire, just for us to practice and see how this works. Okay, so I've cleared some of the screen. Let's get into some scenarios. First one we're going to look at, fairly basic one, 4 plus 1, that there is positive 4 plus positive 1. So that there is just standard addition, that there's going to get us to 5. So that was this scenario here. We're just increasing as opposed to decreasing. So scenario number 2, we're going to have 4 minus negative 1. So what this is saying is that's positive 4 again, and we are minusing negative 1. So we are trying to decrease here, and that's saying it's the opposite of decreasing, which is just increasing. So all of that is going to become 4 plus 1, which is going to get us to 5. So that's actually the exact same result as the previous scenario. We'll go through a few more examples. So we've got question 3. We've got 7 plus negative 2. So we're just going to write that out properly. So we've got positive 7 and we're adding negative 2. So this tells us we are increasing, but the negative sign tells us we're doing the opposite of increasing, which is actually decreasing. It's just subtraction. So we're going to go 7 minus 2. And again, we're getting us to 5. We'll go through a few more. The same applies when there is a negative number on the front. So you've got negative 5, let's say plus 2. So that there's going to be negative 5 plus positive 2. So that means we're increasing it. So we're going to go from negative 5, we're going to add 2, and that's going to land us on negative 3. So same works for that there. And one final example, let's maybe make it a bit trickier. So let's say we've got 10 minus 3 plus negative 2 minus negative 4. So a whole heap going on there. So we're just going to change how that looks. So that's going to be a positive 10 to start off with. We're then minusing positive 3. So that's just standard subtraction. We're then plusing negative 2. We're then minusing negative 4. So the 10 doesn't change. So that's going to be 10. This here is saying we are decreasing and it's in the standard direction. That's the subtraction, minus 3. This here is saying we are adding, but it's in the opposite direction. So it's going to become minus 2. This here is saying we are subtracting or decreasing, but it's the opposite of decreasing. So that's increasing, plus 4. And when we get that all together, so that there's going to become 7 minus the other 2 is 5. We're then going to add the 4, which is going to get us to a final answer of 9. So hopefully you found this video on adding and subtracting integers useful. Just to recap, we learned that integers are whole numbers, and that's largely what we focus on in the video. They can be positive or negative, and it's that negative side of things that kind of switches it to becoming opposites. We learned that two positive numbers, if you're adding a positive, that's increasing. If you're subtracting a positive, that's decreasing. If you're adding a negative, well, that's basically the opposite to decreasing, the opposite to increasing, which is decreasing. And if you are subtracting a negative, that's the opposite to decreasing, which is an increase. We then ran through a whole heap of scenarios as well. So thanks so much again for watching the video. Make sure it's really important you got your notes down. And now let's get into heaps of practice. Let's make sure we've mastered this skill.